Oi oi, it's your boy Hawka back with another video, this time looking at NiP's newest addition to their lineup, Nawwk. Nawwk joined NiP back in January of 2020, so he's had a bit of time to fit into this team, and he came up on those Gamer Legion rosters that always seem to be shifting players. I know sometimes he was having to play with Draken, so he'd take more of a secondary AWPer role, so I was interested to see how that would transition into this NiP lineup where they already have Twist, who can AWP as well. So far in his time on NiP, he's posted a 1.04 rating overall, which is pretty average, including a 1.06 rating at Pro League. So his numbers aren't anything to write home about, but let's see if his gameplay is. We're going to start by looking at Nawwk's debut for NiP, which came back at Blast against FaZe clan. And in case you haven't been paying attention, Nawwk started this round by holding the B side of the map, but then when some of his teammates died over at A, he had to group up and try and salvage the round. This was definitely a common trend throughout this half. Oftentimes Nawwk was just holding the B side of the map and it was basically up to his teammates over at A to win the trades, and then Nawwk was left in these really rough positions where he has to try and do something in a 3v5. And to his credit, he gets a couple of nice kills with the Galil. He at least gets NiP a chance in the round, but FaZe are too strong on this force buy and NiP end up losing. Not really because of Nawwk though. Into the next round, Nawwk hits this clean shot onto the site to make sure the bomb can get planted in a 3v2. So again, Nawwk's aim looking good in these early rounds, and he decides to go back over to bathrooms to try and play the bomb in the post plant. And I like his decision here to get aggressive in bathrooms, because really he just needs to be trying to set up Letcro, who has the rifle. So he tries to see if he can clear out this side of the map, and even though the aggression doesn't work on this occasion, I think it's the play that he had to make, as he gets Letcro's rifle some information and therefore a much better chance at clutching. Going into round 7, and again, Nawwk is holding for map control on the B side of the map, as is his job in the default. And a really common trend throughout this half for Nawwk was that his teammates would lose the trades over at A bathrooms, and then he was forced to try and salvage a suboptimal situation. In this round, he ends up working through Connector, where he wins this fight against Olaf. And then from here, he does really well on this A take from NiP. He lands a fantastic shot over at the man at Dumpster, then he facilitates the bomb plant by clearing out this player in bank, and then in the 2v1, he knows that all he needs to do is play safe, make sure he buys time for his teammate, just play with his teammate, so he just kind of hides in truck, baiting out shots, forcing Brocky to push into the open, and making the clutch much more difficult for Brocky. I think round 10 summarizes this game from Nawwk's perspective pretty nicely. In the majority of these rounds, Nawwk would be doing what was asked of him, he'd be holding on the B side of the map, but then his teammates would either lose the trades on A due to individual mistakes or just due to a bad call overall from the in-game leader, and then Nawwk's left in a position where he can't really have much impact on the round unless he makes a massive play, which he was able to do a couple of times, but for the most part, he's left in situations like this, where he's pushing Monster in a fight that's really not good for him, and he ends up dying. Can't really blame him too much for rounds like these. Round 12 is one of the first time Nawwk's teammates win the trade over on A, and Nawwk does, again, exactly what was asked to him. He holds short, he spots the aggression, he gets the kill, and then once NiP decide that they do want to commit to this B bomb site, he runs in first without much fear, because I think he's pretty safe in the knowledge he's going to get traded here. So overall, again, Nawwk does basically everything right here, except maybe the aim on this second fire onto the site. But he gets traded, so it's not a big deal. So my general takeaway from Nawwk's debut was that he was holding his own, he was doing his job pretty well, but we didn't really get to see any of his AWPing, and he kind of played more as a lurk/support rifler. So let's skip ahead to some more recent demos and see how he slotted into this team. We're jumping into this game against Team Spirit, and this is a shot that Nawwk really should be landing. It's pretty inexcusable to be missing this shot, and at the top level, that can make all the difference. But even the best AWPers are going to miss their mark sometimes, so we'll cut him some slack. Then though, as this round goes on, Nawwk leaves himself vulnerable to both Connector and Ramp, and he really just doesn't focus on Ramp whatsoever. I'm not sure if this was miscommunication from his teammates, or Nawwk just trying to take a risk. Either way, it looks kind of strange to leave himself so open from Ramp. I guess maybe Nawwk was thinking that Spirit would either use nades if they were going to push from Ramp, or that his player pushed in Palace would hear steps from Ramp, but once this dry peek comes in at the right time, Nawwk only gets a 1-for-1 trade on the A site and doesn't leave his team in the best position. In general, it definitely felt like Nawwk was happy to play as a passive player, and sometimes he was just kind of along for the ride in these games. For example, in this one, NiP have a 7-2 lead, and Nawwk only has 4 kills and 2 deaths. This is one of the few rounds where he does try to play aggressive though, and this left eye peek doesn't work out for him. And I think for the most part, Nawwk didn't look too comfortable when making these aggressive plays. Nawwk was also quite static with his CT AWPing throughout this half, generally playing on the A bomb site, and that might be partly because NiP were doing so well. But in round 14, he decides to try the switch up at mid, however when he spots some nades, he decides to back away through connector. He then does this in the very next round though, and this time Team Spirit don't use too many nades, so Nawwk actually pushes top mid, gets a ton of information for his team. This allows NiP to stack much more heavily over on the B side of the map, and allows Nawwk to rotate back over to B to assist his comrades over on the B side. From here, Nawwk connects one shot before being completely blindsided from the player flanking through mid, but just the fact that Nawwk had fully cleared out mid in the first place meant NiP could just focus on the apartments, and that is a massive help when dealing with these B plays. Switching over to the T side of Mirage, Nawwk had a fairly similar role to the one he had over on Overpass. Nawwk's job generally was holding A at the start of the round while his teammates maybe worked mid or maybe worked B. For the most part, this meant that Nawwk didn't get too much early action in these rounds, but this is one of the rounds where he actually gets caught by a Palace flank, and this is something you should always be aware of when you're the A player, but Nawwk is completely clueless as to this being a possibility, which is a bit of a mistake. So once again, Nawwk on the T side is put in a position where he really has to rely more on his feel for how the opponents are playing and his positioning and his in-game intelligence to get kills rather than any flashy AWPing or any aggressive plays. And this is a round where he does that fairly well. Once his teammates start to get the trades over at mid, he gets a good feel for when he can push onto the A bomb site, taking control of this position. And then once he has to actually take the fights, he generally just outpositions his opponents here and makes sure that he's got favorable fights for himself. So again, we're not really seeing Nawwk as a flashy AWPer. He's mostly either been holding angles as an AWP on the CT side, or he's been a rifler on the T side who's been using positioning and using intelligence to get into positions. With the positions that Nawwk is currently playing on the T side, I think it's imperative that his decision making is on point. He needs to know when he can go aggressive and try and make a play to save the round for his team, and he needs to know when he can't go aggressive because he's going to be alone in a lot of these positions. And in this round, once NiP are down in the 2v5, they make the decision to hit the B site, which works out pretty well. Nawwk gets a nice shot onto the player at short. And then once he's put in this 1v3, he realizes he needs to take a risk here. He needs to do something. He can't just let Spirit set up this retake because unless they make a mistake, they're going to win the retake on trades. So he gets aggressive and catches Spirit off guard. And even though Spirit probably could have played this a bit better, it's not exactly the cleanest clutch ever. It's a 1v3 at a really important point of the game, so Nawwk will take these all day long. I think it's also very important that if you're going to have a passive player, he has to be able to win clutches. And sometimes inexperienced players at the top level can struggle with that. But here, Nawwk wins back-to-back 1v3s after the previous round. And look, he's definitely helped by the SG spray here. He's definitely helped by the lineup. But it's still a massive clutch, which basically pushes NiP over the edge in this game. I think finally I want to give some more general takeaways from Nawwk's playstyle. So against the top teams like Vitality and Fnatic, he'd oftentimes be playing passive with the AWP, he'd be able to land some shots. He also had some rounds where he had really nice aim, like this pistol round where he lands some great shots, but for the most part these rounds were pretty rare. You maybe get 1 or 2 of these rounds a game where he'd land some good shots. But then on the other side of the coin, Nawwk would normally have a few rounds in a game where he'd miss some sitters. This round in particular was really painful to watch. These are shots you've got to be landing at the top level, otherwise you're going to get punished. And I think this just happened a bit too often for me throughout these games. For example, here on the pistol round against Fnatic, you can see that Nawwk has a great idea of what Fnatic are going to do. You can see him position himself perfectly to be able to catch these players pushing connector, and then he just misses the shots. And it's frustrating to watch because Nawwk seems like an intelligent player, but there were so many rounds where it felt like he was missing sitters. So maybe I just picked games where he was playing especially badly, but it was still really irritating to see these plays come through. Obviously, there were some rounds where Nawwk's passive playstyle and in-game intelligence worked to his advantage. For example, this round against Fnatic, as soon as he spots the smoke going over Monster, he makes sure to spray through, realizing that Fnatic would go aggressive, and he lines this one up very nicely. I also really like this round from Nawwk, where he decides to go aggressive on short just as this nade is thrown by his teammate to land on the short position, because Flush is going to have no clue that a player is going to be pushing close up against this nade. As soon as you see the nade here, you're probably thinking you're safe in this position. So I love this from Nawwk, a nice little trick. But there are also some rounds where NiP or Nawwk wouldn't clear some positions. For example, this one, both Rez and Nawwk don't look at ZywOo's position on the right side of Garage, so he just gets 2 easy kills. I think with Rez going in first, he should probably be looking this way, but the most important thing is NiP just need to figure out who's looking at which position, and they don't really do that here. And then in this round, while it's a bit weird for Vitality to have 2 players down on the B site, the fact that Nawwk runs all the way onto the bomb site without even looking at this right side, without even realizing there's the potential for a player to be there, just goes to show that even though he was getting the best of players positionally sometimes it would go the other way. So overall in these games I watched, I think Nawwk was generally a pretty intelligent player, but I was a bit concerned about his raw aim, and I'm a bit concerned about his fit on this NiP team. I think Nawwk could work really well on a structured team with a good in-game leader, where he was playing kind of the extremities of the map and maybe making the most of his opponent's rotates, but in this NiP team, I feel like he can't do that as much as he would maybe like. He also definitely comes across as someone who's not going to make aggressive plays too often, who's not going to make calls for himself. At least so far on this NiP team, he's not been going aggressive with the AWP too often. So again, that would really, I think, fit more onto a team that has a very well-established in-game leader, which this NiP squad don't really have. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Nawwk. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.